Good afternoon and welcome to the Tuesday, August 15th, El Paso County Commissioner Redistricting Commission meeting. I am calling this meeting to order at this time, and we'll start with item number 1.
Item number 1 is opening remarks.
If my colleagues don't mind, I will start this off with a few comments myself. Good afternoon and welcome to the Redistricting Commission meeting. I am Cammie Bremer and I am chair of the Board of County Commissioners and chairing this commission, Redistricting Commission, as well. For all of the people that have joined us in this whole process, today is the culmination of a lot of hard work by numerous people and citizens and staff. Today is the day we plan to adopt a final map, and as we start this meeting, I want to ask everyone again to continue to engage in a respectful dialogue and only speak comments and address the group from the microphone so that it's a part of the official record and so that we can all hear what you have to say. This process began back in April, and including today's meeting, we have held 14 meetings, created and analyzed 24 maps, and have held listening sessions in all 5 county commissioner districts. That is more than the law that created this process required, and our citizens have been incredibly responsive. We've had over 130 citizen comments submitted online, and citizens have spoken at every single one of our meetings, and that's at a much more robust level than the involvement that we saw in this process in other counties. And for that, I'm very grateful because I think that we have some options in front of us that are a direct result of that input process. We've also had about 6 citizen submitted maps. And as we embark on this meeting today, I want to express my sincere appreciation to my fellow commission members who've dedicated their time and expertise to this intense process. I'd also like to thank the staff who've turned our direction into a tangible process and worked well under the process outlined by House Bill 21-1047. For those tuning in, that's our County Attorney Kenny Hodges, Clerk and Recorder Steve Schleicher, Deputy Clerk and Recorder Christy Ridlin, Chief Deputy County Attorney Steve Klafke, Government Affairs Director Ryan Parcell, Elections Director Angie Leith, IS Supervisor Carl Nordstrom, GIS Data Specialist Sydney Nelson, GIS Supervisor Mike Dyson, and Scott Anderson with the communications team. Thank you all for your hard work, for the vacations, weddings, and family gatherings that you've missed, and sick days that you've worked through to assist us in this monumental task. Most of all, I would like to sincerely thank the citizens who've attended, commented, and have given feedback throughout this entire process. In other counties, as I mentioned, few people showed up to these meetings, and I'm proud that our residents chose to stay engaged and involved. And again, I think we have some results that speak to that input. With that said, do any of my fellow commission members have any opening comments today? Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to specifically welcome former Senator Pete Lee to our deliberations today. Thank you for coming, and also would like to thank our current Senator Larry Liston for being here as well. Thank you to both of our senators for being here today. We appreciate your interest in these deliberations. And my apologies. I'd also like to thank former Representative Lois Landgraf also for being here. Lois, thank you for being here. And my apologies for not mentioning you immediately, but we have also a former Representative Lois Landgraf here as well, and thank you for your interest.
Any other opening remarks from the commission members? Okay, item number 2.
Item number 2 is general updates or final presentations. Steve Schleicher, El Paso County Clerk and Recorder, and Ryan Parcell, Executive Director of Government Affairs.
All right. We are going to tag team this here. Sorry, I need to be able to pull the other presentation. There we go.
Mr. Purcell, if you could, when you're ready, speak a little closer into the mic or pull it up to you. Thank you.
All right. Is that better? Okay, 1 second here. Okay. Well, up to this point, we've always done a general update about the upcoming meetings and everything else, but at this point, we don't have any additional ones that are scheduled. So this is going to be a recap here of some of the information Commissioner Bremer already covered, but just for the agenda standpoint, I'll go over the deadline status, a final recap of the work that's been done up to this point, and then I'll pause at the competitiveness, and then as Clerk and Recorder Schleicher goes through some of the maps and the reports, I'll come up and do the competitiveness portion from the PVI and the voter registration on the maps under consideration. So as Commissioner Bremer said, this process started back in April. We had these deadlines out on the screen here to complete the website, invite members of the public to submit maps, and to hold all 5 hearings, one in each commissioner district. We met all of our deadlines on time as outlined on this page. August 8th was the deadline for any additional plan submitted by the Redistricting Commission. We had the meeting on the 8th, and there was some additional direction given at that point. August 11th was the last day for public comment to be submitted online, and there was only one comment that we submitted after the deadline of midnight on August 11th, and then today is the anticipated final adoption of a plan. So up to this point, I'm happy to report from a staff perspective, we met all the deadlines, exceeded all the statutory requirements ahead of schedule. Here are the dates where we had the different meetings, starting on April 18th and going through the district-specific meetings, all the way through the August 11th meeting and including today's meeting. Just as a recap here, that means that 6 of the meetings that we had started at 5:30 p.m., 3 started at 1 p.m., and 3 started at 9, so we distributed the times accordingly. There were 31 different maps that were created and analyzed. This slide's a little bit old. Commissioner Bremer's correct. There were 130 comments left online, and then the citizen maps. So with that being said, just wanted to provide that recap of the work that had been done from a staff perspective and turn it over to Clerk and Recorder Schleicher.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Christian, can you go ahead and pull up my presentation, please? Thank you, sir. Okay, so Commissioners, looking at what was our assigned task from the August 11th meeting. So we were to sit there and review and analyze Final Map 1, version 2, which was submitted during our August 8th redistricting meeting, Final Map 6, version 2, and Final Map 6, version 3. So moving on to Final Map 1, version 2. So this map was submitted during the August 8th Commissioner Redistricting meeting and was based from Final Map 1. Edits were made to this map within the public meeting. We did identify that Precinct 560 is split along State Highway 94. Precinct 444 is split. Precinct 180 is split, and also Precinct 312 is split. So taking a look at the criteria that we have followed through this whole entire process is the 30 suggested precincts in the Southeast Colorado Springs. Are they consolidated into one district? And they are not because of that one split precinct. Fountain, Fort Carson, Security, Whitefield, Hanover, are they together? And they are not. So here is a PDF version of Final Map 1, and there's also a copy up in the back here, Centennial Hall, for all to see. In compliance with House Bill 21-1047, the overall range and deviation is 4.62%. And as you are aware, is if we are within 5% of deviation, then we comply with 1047. The total precincts moved on this map are 90, so 27.86%. Total affected population, 104,236, which equates out to 14.22% of total population. Total effective active voters, according to this map version, is 69,125, which is 14.29%. Going along with House Bill 21-1047, as you see here by each district, the total population based on this map variation. The target deviation for District 1 is 2,530 citizens below the deviation. District 2 is 2,596 citizens below the deviation. District 3, 4,172 citizens above the deviation. District 4, 2,231 citizens above the deviation. And finally, in Commissioner District 5, 1,279 citizens below the deviation. And has been practiced since we began this process is looking at the districts that have the highest growth, which are 1, 2, and 4. So we've been sitting here concentrating on having a higher deviation, or lower deviation, I should say, of citizens to allow for future growth. Here are the precinct moves for each commissioner district, the precincts added, the precincts deleted, and the total impact. The ones that are highlighted are precincts that have been split and also addressed in the red font. Taking a look based on this final map 1 version 2, here is our total population, racial ethnicity information. And here is a summation of all of that data. What we are seeing is in Commissioner District 4, a 5.31% increase in Hispanic or Latino, a 5.44% decrease in White Caucasian. District 5, we're seeing a 5.37% decrease in Hispanic or Latino, and an 8.42% increase in White Caucasian. Now moving on to the total population as it's broken down here by bar graph. And going into final map 1 version 2 of our voting age population. Here's the complete data for each commissioner district. And here is a summation. District 3, we are seeing a decrease of 3.59% White Caucasian. District 4, an increase of 3.73% Hispanic or Latino. And in District 5, we're seeing a decrease of 3.41% Hispanic or Latino, and an increase of 7.58% White Caucasian. And here's that bar graph for our voting age population by each commissioner district. So moving on to the second criteria, communities of interest and compactness, as we have done before, is outlining all of our municipalities and our military installations. And here are the commissioner districts that those municipalities lie within according to this map. Moving on to our 17 different school districts. And here is a map for all to see of the school district boundaries and where they lie within the commissioner district. In addition to that, here's what we're looking at as far as the 30 precincts. 99.9%, or 98.33%, excuse me, all precincts of the Southeast precincts are in Commissioner District 4, except for 180, which is split, and half of that precinct is in District 5. And these districts seem to be compact. Moving on to the third criteria of political competitiveness, and as we have done is, here is United States President, and on the far right-hand column, you will see the deviation from current. So based on what our current maps are today, based on this new map of Final Map 1 version 2. Here's that bar graph. Moving on to the race of United States Senate. And as you can see double-digit increases in some districts from deviation from current. Colorado Governor, Colorado Secretary of State, El Paso County Clerk and Recorder, El Paso County Sheriff, and the summation is where we're looking at District 1, 28.39% based on this map, lean Republican. District 2, 23.95% lean Republican. District 3, 5.70% lean Republican. District 4, 3.42% lean Democrat. And in District 5, 0.59%, so less than 1%, lean Republican. And as I have shared before, is closer to zero means more competitive. Here is the third criteria, looking at the political competitiveness. This is basically all registered voters here in El Paso County. And Ryan will sit there and break that down by commissioner district. But what we're looking at is from January 2nd of 2023 to July 31st of 2023, we've seen an increase of registered voters of 3.96%. Republican countywide makes up 30.74%. Democrat 17.97%, and unaffiliated is 4.38%. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Ryan to go ahead and break down each commissioner district.
Okay. Since this is the final meeting, I wanted to go through a couple of the other competitiveness factors that we first addressed in the initial presentation. Now, if you're looking in the booklet, Mr. Schleicher's presentation is in there as well as mine. If you go to the back of the book, it actually shows up as page 6 and 7, which is where we're more or less starting from here. So again, the criteria outlined in the law is that that the different districts don't deviate more than 5%, that they comply with the Voting Rights Act of 1965, that they preserve communities of interest and political subdivisions. And then the final criteria is thereafter, to the extent reasonably possible, maximize the number of politically competitive districts. Here's that line from statute, and it defines politically competitive as having a reasonable potential for the party affiliation of the district's county commissioner to change at least once during the 10-year period. As we talked about, Mr. Schleicher has done some initial competitiveness calculations based off of a number of races that staff recommended that ran the gamut of some federal, some statewide, and some local races to give you a quick snapshot, of what it would look like under those lines. At the initial meeting too, we also talked about something called the Cook Partisan Voting Index, which is recognized within the political science community as a way to measure how competitive a district is based off of the average of presidential results from the last 2 cycles. And so as it says here, a Cook PVI score of D+2, for example, means that in 2016 and 2020 presidential elections, the district performed an average of 2 points more Democratic than the nation did as a whole. So if you think back to the last 2 presidential elections, President Trump got about 46% both times. So if you average it out, it comes out to about 46%. And the Democratic nominees got about 48 and 51% respectively between 2016 and 2020, which averages out to about 48%. And so it's against that on the presidential level that we're looking for deviation. So even if a district is coming in as, say, R+1, that means that the Republican typically gets about 47%. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're consistently winning or anything like that. And so to recap some of the things that we covered last time, here are the PVI scores for a number of states. Interestingly, every state that's listed on this list voted for President Biden in 2020. So you can see a range of D+4 for Colorado up to R+3, D+2 for Maine, et cetera. If we were to do that calculation for just El Paso County and you look at the presidential results, that comes out with a PVI score for all of El Paso County of R+9. And I think that would be a good baseline and a reminder as we go through some things here. And this is a really long introduction. I promise we won't get this wordy for all of the slides when we're examining all the maps, so I apologize. But what this graph is here is every race for the last 10 years that have flipped party control, and then the PVI score that is affiliated with that. And so the blue bar means that when it flipped in that particular category, it flipped for the Democrats. And if it's red in a particular category, then it flipped for the Republicans. So I'll draw your attention to the even bar that you see somewhat close to the middle there. In all the districts across the country that flipped, that were rated as even under PVI, Democrats typically won those more so than Republicans. But this graph, as most graphs like this, can be somewhat misleading. If you see on the far left, you see a D+22 district. There are certainly some anomalies in this, given that there have been some court order redistricting that have happened in the last 10 years. There were circumstances where a new seat technically flipped party control, but it doesn't necessarily mean that a Republican won a D+22 seat to begin with before it flipped. But there are some instances, like in Utah, where there was a Democrat that held an R+22 seat. But those are certainly the anomalies. So if, as you do, you look at where most of the data is and you get rid of the anomalies, that I want to focus you on this that has a range of a D+7 on one side and an R+10 on another. And if you look at where most of the races, even in this lie, D+3 to R+3 are things that can be reasonably considered competitive. The data shows that with a PVI score of around that range, you have a lot of seats that have changed hands in the last 10 years. And if we apply that criteria and do a PVI calculation for the maps under consideration today, I think it is reasonable to say that any map or where a district falls within the D+3 to an R+3 range is something that can be considered competitive. So that being said, here's the PVI scores for the districts as they stand now. I do want to draw your attention to the fact that in the process of calculating these, I realized that the initial PVI scores that I gave to districts 1 and 2 were off by 1 point. So those have been adjusted to R+16 and R+15. The math was good on the other ones. So you can see here what the PVI is for these. So if we look at map 1 version 2, if we were to look at the PVI, if you look at the 2020 and the 2016, this is our estimation for what the PVI scores are for each respective district under consideration for map 1 version 2, which means that Commissioner Districts 4 and 5 fall firmly within the range of what PVI would say is the most competitive, with District 3 also being very close to that as well. And then if we looked at party registration numbers, which can also be an indicator of competitiveness, which Commissioner Gonzalez asked that we look at as well for these final maps, you can see the outline between Republican, Democratic, unaffiliated, and minor party voters in each of the districts. So where Mr. Schleicher showed the overall trend of registration countywide, this shows it broken down by district. So as you'd expect, you see a large number of unaffiliated voters in every district because there's a large number of unaffiliated voters throughout the county. And then you can see how it's broken down between the two major parties, with District 4 having a very close party registration figure here. So unless there are any questions, I will pause and let Mr. Schleicher resume his presentation with map 6 version 2.
Are there any questions on competitiveness analysis? Thank you.
Okay, so Commissioners, since there are no questions on Final Map 1 version 2, we'll move on to Final Map 6 version 2. So the creation of the Final Map 6 version 2, so this map was submitted during the August 8th Commissioner redistricting meeting and was based from Final Map 6. Precinct 560 is split along State Highway 94. Taking a look at the southeast 30 suggested precincts, are they all consolidated into one district? They are. Is Fountain, Fort Carson, Security, Widefield, Hanover all together? And they are. Here is a PDF version for all to sit there and look at of this final map, and there's also one in the back for the public to look at as well. So in compliance with House Bill 21-1047, is Final Map 6 version 2 does fall within the overall range of deviation at 4.61%. The total precincts that have been moved are 63, which is 19.5%. Total affected population, 112,914, which equates out to be 15.41%. Total effective active voters, 71,134, which comes out to be 14.71% of our total effective active voters here in El Paso County. Taking a look at our target deviation for each commissioner district is in District 1, we are 2,902 citizens below the deviation. District 2, 875 below the deviation. District 3, we're 26 citizens above the deviation. District 4, 105 below the deviation. And in District 5, 3,854 citizens above the deviation. And again, as a total map, we are in compliance with House Bill 21-1047. Here are the total precinct moves for Final Map 6 version 2. And as you can see here, the highlighted is precinct 560 out on the Eastern Plains, where it is split at State Highway 94. So going on to our first criteria of population equality and the Voter Right Act. So here's the information for total population based on Final Map 6 version 2. And let's go ahead and summarize this data. So in District 4, we are seeing a decrease of 3.13% Hispanic or Latino. We're seeing an increase of 4.15% White Caucasian. In District 5, we're seeing an increase of 6.28% Hispanic or Latino and a decrease of 8.32% White Caucasian. Here's that bar chart. And now moving on to the voting age population for Final Map 6 version 2. So here's the criteria for voting age population, and I will summarize. District 4, we're seeing an increase of 3.66% White Caucasian. And in District 5, we're seeing an increase of 3.81% Hispanic or Latino and a decrease of 7.18% White Caucasian. Broken down by our bar graph. And moving on to our second criteria of communities of interest and compactness, as we have done with our municipalities, is all of those here within each commissioner district and also our 5 military installations here in El Paso County. Our 17 different school districts where they are located within each commissioner district. And here is a map of the school districts for where they are located based on Map 6 version 2. Moving on with the 30 Southeast precincts, 100% of these precincts are now within District 5, and the districts seem to be compact. Moving on to the third criteria of political competitiveness is where we're looking at U.S. President. There's the chart. U.S. Senate. Colorado Governor. Secretary of State. Clerk and Recorder. County Sheriff. And a summary of all 6 races broken down. So looking at District 1 is 27.12% lean Republican. District 2, 24.48% lean Republican. District 3, 0.51% lean Republican. District 4, 10.8% lean Republican. And finally, in District 5, 6.37% lean Democrat. And as we all know, closest to zero is the most competitive. Here's a breakdown of total registered voters in El Paso County. And this is the same chart as we looked at with Map 1 version 2. Are there any questions before I turn it over to Ryan for the PVI for final Map 6 version 2? All right.
All right. With final map 6 version 2, the PVI for the districts 1 through 5 is as follows. 1 is R plus 16, 2 is R plus 15, 3 is R plus 2, 4 is R plus 9, and 5 would be even under this map. When it comes to the party registration, you see here that that the numbers between the major political parties are very close in District 5, somewhat favoring the Democrats, and a little bit less close in District 4. And I can speak to that more a little bit later, but those are the voter registration numbers as it would exist as of earlier this week for Map 6 version 2. Are there any questions about either of these figures? Okay.
Okay, so commissioners, on to final map 6 version 3, which is our final map of the day. So the creation of this map was submitted during the August 8th Commissioner Redistricting Meeting, was based on final map 6 version 2. As mentioned, precinct 560 is split along State Highway 94. All 30 suggested precincts in the southeast are in one district, and also Security, Whitefield, Hanover, Fountain, Fort Carson are all in one district. Here is a PDF copy of final map 6 version 3, and like the other two, there is a larger copy up in the back for all to see. So in compliance with House Bill 21-1047, looking at the overall range and deviation for final map 6 version 3, we are at 2.71%. And to meet the requirement of 1047, we have to be less than 5%. Total precincts moved is 63, which comes out to be 19.5% of our total precincts. Total affected population, 138,664, which is 18.92% of our total population. And total effective active voters is 87,827, which is 18.16% of our total active voters. Again, in compliance with House Bill 21-1047, looking at the target deviation, District 1 is 449 citizens above the deviation. District 2, 260 citizens above the deviation. District 3, 979 citizens above the deviation. District 4, 2,832 citizens below the deviation. And lastly, in District 5, 1,142 citizens above the deviation. Here's a list of the precincts added, precincts deleted, and the total impact in each commissioner district for final map 6 version 3. And as highlighted is precinct 560 is split along State Highway 94. Moving on to our first criteria of population equality and the Voter Right Act. So final map 6 version 3, here is the total population broken down by racial ethnicity. And let's summarize. District 4, we're seeing a decrease of 3.02% Hispanic or Latino. In District 4, we're seeing an increase of 3.86% White Caucasian. In District 5, we're seeing an increase of 6.54% Hispanic or Latino and a decrease of 8.63% White Caucasian. Here's broken down by the total numbers. And now moving on to the voting age population for Final Map 6 version 3. Here's the total numbers based on this map, and we'll summarize. District 4, an increase of 3.37% White Caucasian, and in District 5, we're seeing an increase of 3.99% Hispanic or Latino, and a decrease of 7.46% White Caucasian in District 5. Again, it's broken down here in the bar graph. Moving on to the second criteria, communities of interest and compactness. Here are our municipalities and also our military installations and where they are now with each commissioner district. Our 17 different school districts. Here is a map of the school districts and what commissioner district they now reside in. And also the 30 Southeast precincts, where 100% of these precincts are in Commissioner District 4, and the districts seem to be compact. Our third criteria of political competitiveness, as we've done with the previous maps, here's the race for U.S. President. U.S. Senate. Colorado Governor. Secretary of State, El Paso County Clerk and Recorder. Lastly, El Paso County Sheriff. And the summation of all 6 of those races, District 1, we're looking at 26.6% leaning Republican. District 2, 24.48% leaning Republican. District 3, 0.41% leaning Republican. District 4, 11.2% leaning Republican, and District 5, 6.65% leaning Democrat. And as shared many times before, closest to 0 is the most competitive. As with the previous 2 maps, here is the total of registered voters in El Paso County from January 2nd of this year to July 31st. We have increased 3.96%. And broken down by major parties, where 30.74% is Republican, 17.97% are registered Democrats, 48.38% are registered unaffiliated. Are there any questions before I turn it back over to Mr. Parcell for a PVI?
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. If you might go back to the Southeast Precincts evaluation map. I believe you stated they were, I just want to make sure I heard right or wrong. I think you said they were in Commissioner District 4. I think they are on the map in Commissioner District 5.
Commissioner, great catch. You are correct. Commissioner District 5.
Thank you very much.
We will make that correction and put it out on the public website.
Thank you so much.
So to clarify, the map did not change at all. The number on the chart summary analysis simply indicates other than what the colored map indicates.
Right. So, Commissioner, looking at that is all 30 precincts defined are in Commissioner District 5, so 100% are within Commissioner District 5.
And commissioners, apologize for that. We've all looked over those slides and we missed that. So good catch. Okay. So if we round out with map 6 version 3, here was the PVI that was calculated for those maps. District 1 at R plus 16, District 2 at R plus 15, District 3 at R plus 2, District 4 at R plus 9, and District 5 as even. Here are the party affiliations for those districts as outlined in the map proposals. And I think it's interesting that in this, if you look at District 3, which under this map is in R plus 2, I just want to point out that sometimes the voter registration numbers, which sometimes redistricting commissions put a lot of stock in, don't always paint the entire picture, which is why I think that it's good that we looked at election results as opposed to just party registration numbers. Because sometimes unaffiliated voters are conflated with independent voters or somebody who might change their mind from election to election. And if you look at past behavior, that can give you a more clear picture as how people may behave.
And to clarify, if you're following along, that's on page 12 in the printed book.
Thank you.
At the back.
And so just as a recap, I wanted to put this slide together so you could see all the PVIs for all the map versions side by side. So I'm going to stay here for just a moment before I move to observations and use this as an opportunity to address a question that a citizen brought up at one point, which is when they were looking at districts 1 and 2, they looked at the very Republican favoring numbers and said, well, what can be done to make those more competitive? And if I may just proffer the idea that that there's a lot of factors at play, including things like self-sorting that happen nationwide, where people tend to, you can see a trend over time that people like to live next to people that tend to think like them or worship like them or vote like them or anything like that. And so in some of these areas in the northern or the eastern portions of the county, in order to make those competitive, you'd have to pair them with areas more downtown that tend to vote differently to try to create a competitive district. And I think that in order to try to achieve that, you wouldn't have very compact districts. And then also too, if you look at the PVI score for the county, which is R plus 9, there are just more people that tend to vote for one political party over the other. And so even if there were 100 precincts in El Paso County and they all voted 51-49 one way, you could draw the lines any way that you wanted and you would still only get a 51-49 result. So with that being said, just a couple of observations. Under the current map, districts 3 with even and districts 5 with an R plus 3 fall within the competitive range as defined by Cook Partisan Voting Index. Under map 6 version 2, map 6 versions 3, you still have 2 districts, or you still have one district that is categorized as even and actually one that that moves a little bit more towards the even way by going to an R plus 2. And then under map 1 version 2, you have districts 4 and 5, which were R plus 3. And then you had another one that was just outside of that as an R plus 4. So I think that, that hopefully between the work that the clerk and recorder has done to calculate competitiveness and looking at how districts would vote and this analysis along with the voter registration numbers, we hope that that arms you guys with enough information that you can use to make a determination on political competitiveness. With that being said, are there any other questions?
Are there any questions on this analysis presentation? Okay. Thank you. Item number 3.
Item number 3 is public comment. The Redistricting Commission will afford up to 3 minutes for public comments addressing map options under consideration for final adoption. And Madam Chair, I am aware that there are some people online that would like to comment as well.
Excellent. Can I just, for time management and the management of the flow for everyone to get to speak, can I get a show of hands of those of you in the audience that are going to speak? Thank you. And then Christian, how many do we have queued up online? Just one? Okay. Let's maybe start with that one online then. I was going to see if we needed to go back and forth. But if that person is ready, let's go ahead and call them in.
Unknown
I'm here to make
participant is now
public comment.
joining.
Am I being heard? My name is Zuri Horwitz. I'm calling from District 3.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being online for us. You can begin your public comments at any point, and we will start a 3-minute timer.
All right, I'm Zuri Horwitz. I'm calling from District 3. I wanted to say none of the final maps are acceptable. First off, 6v2 and 6v3 are essentially the same map. They are 99.4% the same, so there are only 2 final maps. Secondly, all of the maps place Monument with the West Side. They have nothing in common with each other. There's no common wildlife interface with Monument and the West Side. They do not share a fire protection district. You have to drive through District 1 to get to the rest of District 3 in all of these maps. How would fire trucks access District 3 from the north to the south except by using I-25? This has been said over and over again. See the District 3 meeting on July 10th, 2023, and the last districting meeting on August 8th, 2023. The only reason you're placing Monument in District 3 is to gerrymander District 3 for the second time in 6 years. These maps need to be thrown out. There were maps with acceptable starting points, final maps 2 and 4, where Monument was placed in District 1, and they weren't even considered for final maps. Each time, the commissioners would bring up some different random quibble that would then be addressed by the public, and then the maps and proposed changes to address the commissioners' issues were ignored. This has not been a legitimate process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, and no more online to clarify, Christian? Okay, thank you. With that, let's begin with any public comments from within the room. If I could have you, as you're able to make it down and kind of queue up on either side, whichever's most convenient to you, and we'll kind of go back and forth hearing public comments at this time. And as you make your way down, please remember to introduce yourself clearly for the record. State your name if you're able to tell us which district you live in, and then your 3 minutes will begin.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. First of all, I want to thank you for all of your hard work that you've put into this effort. I'm sure it's been grueling. I wanted to really talk about Map 1, which splits the Fountain Valley. And one of the comments that has been made from the beginning was keeping Fountain Valley, Fountain Fort Carson together. It also takes all of the military out of that district, which has been a big issue, keeping Fort Carson with Fountain. Another issue that I have, one of the other things that you've talked about consistently, is underpopulating District 4. This particular map overpopulates District 4 by 2,231 people, and it also underpopulates District 5, which, as we know, is not seeing growth and is not one of the districts that needs to be underpopulated. I know that it has the political competitiveness that is important, but so do the other maps, and I'm hoping that you will lean towards either of the other 2 maps. Thank you very much. Oh, and also thank you to the staff. I know they've worked extremely hard to get to this day.
Yes, Jody Ritchie, and I am in District 5. And I could just say ditto to what Honorable Lois Landgraf said and walk away, but I do want to reemphasize a couple of things that she said. One was, well, I don't know if she mentioned this or not, but there are 4 precincts in map 1. I'm speaking against map 1. There are 4 precincts that are split, and I kind of understand splitting one of the precincts that's way out east that's very rural. But those that are in town, to split those, I work with voters, and it is difficult and sometimes confusing for voters to understand the political landscape and organization of our county as it is. But then to split streets up, to actually split up a precinct between commissioner districts, I think would just be totally confusing to the voters. And I'm also concerned about the overpopulation of D4 by, 2,200 people. I think that that doesn't allow for the growth that was supposed to be planned into this, so that you have D1, D2, and D4 that are underpopulated to give them a chance to grow. And also D5 being underpopulated, that should be overpopulated, not underpopulated. So I would strongly recommend, and I hope that you would not vote for map 1. Thank you.
Hello, commissioners. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Amy Pascal. I live in District 3. I just want to make some comments that I'm disappointed in some of the outcomes of this commission. Firstly, the law requires 3 maps to be the final maps. 2 of the maps in this list are identical, save 2 precincts. I don't think that's enough of a difference to count that as a 3rd map. So I don't personally think the 3 map requirement was met. I also note that the maps that we have here were maps that were originated by commissioners on the committee here. They were not maps that originated by any of the citizens or the groups that worked together to put maps together, which all of those maps were dropped out of consideration. And I think that's really unfortunate. The whole point of this process is to get more ideas in than just the commissioners' ideas. And there, I agree that splitting of precincts is not a good idea. It's confusing to the voters, and it makes it harder for the elections department. And I think, we have a lot of maps to choose from that did not split precincts. And so maps that were created by people who are professionals in GIS, mapping and that sort of thing. And it's really unfortunate that their maps were ignored. So as you guys all stated, yes, you met the legal requirements, but I personally don't think you met the will of the people, because we're here again with this commission drawing their own districts, which I don't think most voters want. I really don't. What else was I going to say? Also as a District 3 voter, I'm not super thrilled with the idea of putting Monument into District 3. As Zuri Horowitz already said, I think the only reason that was done was to move the competitiveness out of even up 2 points for the Republicans, which I don't think is a good thing to do, obviously, since I am a citizen of District 3 and I'm a Democrat. So that's all I have. Thank you. I also want to say thank you to the elections department. I know they worked really, really hard. They're a great group of people. I've worked as an election judge several times, and I'm super impressed with that department. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Betsy Vanderwerf. I am a resident of District 3. I want to thank all of you for your time, your dedication, your devotion, working with staff, working with the public, working with a lot of stress during this time to compile the maps. I really appreciate the staff of Steve Schleicher's office for putting together all of our numbers. I also want to thank all of the public input that has come from this. I want to recognize that we are all residents of El Paso County. I have never felt that there was one commissioner or one commissioner district that overruled another commissioner's district with unreasonable work, and I'm addressing that particularly with roads. I think this whole mapping process has been fair. And with the mapping process, I have worked with other citizen groups in our area. And I would like to make it known that I feel that the MAP 6 version 3 is very fair. It used the voting statistics that Steve Schleicher incorporated, not just the registration numbers. And I would like for the commissioners to consider that map to be fair for all of the residents of El Paso County. Thank you.
Thank you. Please introduce yourself and your 3 minutes will begin.
My name is Catherine Chukas. I live in District 3. This may be the last time I have the opportunity to speak on this topic. First of all, I want to say there's errors in the final document about communities of interest. Let me know how I can share them. I speak today in appreciation for the website and for the staff who read the written comments and made sure information was publicly available. I cannot speak in appreciation for where the Redistricting Commission ended up. For those of you who have not been present in meetings or online recently, I'd like it to be known that we ended up in a bad place. The 3 finalist maps have had no time to gel. They've had no time to get improved upon by staff. They had no time to get improved upon, even though I made suggestions in the public meeting on the 8th. We're splitting precincts like 312 unnecessarily. For final map 6, you're deciding between maps which are 99% identical. So it'll come down to whether Redistricting Commissioner Vanderwerf thinks that District 3 should cut out Broadmoor precincts or Rock Rimmon precincts. Since the politician Vanderwerf gets political contributions, as seen on Tracer, from his people in the neighborhood of the Broadmoor, more so than Rock Rimmon, you probably know how he's going to vote. For final map 1, because of technical or time-constraint difficulties that Redistricting Commissioner Geithner faced, she presented an option only at the final meeting, and that is a shame. There was no time to question why she felt that School District 49 is more important to keep whole at the expense of so many other school districts. It's completely unfair to unify that school district and not consider any others, like Widefield Security or Fountain Fort Carson or Harrison. There was public comment to unify these school districts. No resident asked for D49 to be unified. It's just what Ms. Geithner said was important. It's pretty clear that the redistricting commissioners either have no memory of public comments made over the past few months, or they choose to ignore them. Precinct 445 is a classic example of this. Why take one precinct of School District 20 and place it one precinct with the people on the plains? Why not listen to that? Why split the Woodmore neighborhood from Palmer Lake? Redistricting commissioners as politicians had their own agenda, and they used the last few hours on August 8th to put those agendas into place. According to law, our county can redistrict again as soon as the Legislative Council makes population data available to this county. That could be in 2 years or it could be in 8. Either way, I hope everyone realizes that having politicians on the Redistricting Commission is a bad idea. They just mess it up for the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Please introduce yourself and your comments will begin. And then I understand we have 2 more online. If we can get one of them queued up without interrupting the citizen speaking, that would be great. Thank you, Christian.
Good afternoon. First, I want to thank you, gentlemen and ladies, for the great job you've done. I'm going to approach you in a different manner. I'm going to approach you from my Native American side. You guys, you young people don't know about it, but my grandparents and great-grandparents do know it, how you came, took our land over, raped what it was. You went into Black Forest, took away our hunting grounds. You went over there to the other areas and built on the mountain. You went to Garden of the Gods and took that over. You went to Manitou Springs and took that over. The Hispanic side of my family, you don't remember, this is Colorado. This is Colorado Springs. You have streets named Tijuana, which I thought was hilarious. And then you have Juanita, El Paso. You came later. Your families came later. My family was already here. Now you come again and tell us this is where we got to be, this is where we got to stay. I was really hurt and disappointed because I've taken time out of my life, brought my little nanny kids, brought my granddaughters so they would know what this is like. I don't have anything personally against any of you, none. But I do represent, like I said, 9 generations of Coloradans. In fact, going on 10, because we just had a brand new baby. So you can think the way you want. I know how you feel, but the bottom line is you came and took northeast from us, now southeast, Fort Carson in that area. Those were not just Hispanics. You had the Dutch come here. You had the people from the Civil War come here to try to find a place to live. They're still underclass people. I represent Nob Hill, and more so here in a couple of weeks. I joined Kono. Those people right now are not happy. So it's not just Hispanics, it's not just blacks here. You have Native Americans, you disrespected the Utes. So now we're doing it again. So think within your heart, think within your mind. I don't like what I saw, but the best thing, like they told us 2 weeks ago at the Hispanic Convention, if you get involved, if you get voted, then you make change. But I tell you what, if I got voted and it gets changed, I will not be like that. I can't. My grandparents brought me up. My grandfather was the only person that spoke limited English in the city of Sugar City and on city council. We didn't even know he was there. It was so amazing to see that they accepted him. So if we can think that way, and you think on this, remember, you're not going to be on this earth forever, but your grandchildren will, your great-grandchildren will, and they're going to meet mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Christian, do we have someone available online?
Unknown participant is now joining.
Hello?
Hello. Welcome to the Redistricting Commission meeting. Introduce yourself if you would, please, and then you'll have your 3 minutes.
Should I turn the volume off on my computer? Hello?
Yes, hello. Can you hear us?
Yes.
We can hear you in the auditorium. This is the Redistricting Commission meeting, and we're in public comment. Please introduce yourself, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Thank you. My name is Shauna Black. I'm in District 3. I am voicing my support for MAP 6 version 3 and my opposition to MAP 1. Specifically, MAP 1 creates a voting block of minority citizens, which is segregating them away from the rest of the population, which in my opinion is against the Voting Rights Act. We should not be basing maps based on the colors of people's skin, their language, or even their station in life. And that's my main issue with MAP 1, is that segregation of minority citizens. And secondly, it divides Fountain Valley, and it creates a district basically for a Democrat candidate, which again assumes that minority citizens will be voting for a Democrat candidate, which I believe is discriminatory for many, many reasons. As a resident of District 3, Commissioner District 3, MAP 6 version 3, I believe does serve a community of interest, and that community of interest is the Front Range. All of the communities, including Monument and Palmer Lake, have similar interests in terms of the mountain range, fire mitigation, et cetera. And I don't believe that carving out parts of the Front Range to put in a different district makes sense. Thank you very much. And thank you, commissioners, for all your hard work.
Thank you. And while we queue up one more we have online, is there anyone else in the audience here who would like to speak? Christian, we'll take the one in the audience first and be ready for that one after these comments.
Unknown participant is now joining.
Senator Lee, if you would please introduce yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, commissioners. Pete Lee, resident of District 3, and thank you for the opportunity to talk today. I also really want to commend the staff for the extraordinary job that they did, and I almost have to apologize to them as the sponsor of 1047 for getting them into the weeds as deeply as they had to get into to do this. So I really commend both the commissioners and the staff for the work that you've done, your attempt to be accountable and transparent, and to go out into the community to get community input. I can't help, though, express my concern about the final maps that made the final cut, particularly the splitting of the Monument Palmer Lake districts and appending those to District 3. It seems to me that when I came in here on April 18th, I said the challenge this commission is going to face is to overcome their own instincts for self-preservation. It's a very difficult thing for a partisan to do, which is why we had in the law the opportunity for an independent election commission. You opted to put yourselves in that very difficult position of operating against your instincts. When I see the map prepared with with Commission District 3 containing those orphan detached precincts, it seems to violate the basic rules of contiguity, and it seems to be a classic case of gerrymandering to try to take orphan precincts up here and attach them down here to a district which they are not geographically affiliated with. So I'm disappointed that it came out that way, but those are the challenges that we face, and thank you for the work that you've done.
Thank you. Christian, are we available with a member of the public online?
Hello. Hello, my name is John Gerald. I'm a resident of District 5. I'm homesick today. Sorry I couldn't be there. I'd like to say that I appreciate the staff providing those PVI numbers. I think they give a clearer picture of competitiveness and some of the themes that we've been talking about over these past couple months. And, you know, it's not a measure determined by the commission, which is probably, if we are going to have commissions that aren't independent, it probably should be in the law that competitiveness is measured in some objective way and not determined by the commission yourselves. But we can see there that District 3, the one that a lot of people are speaking on today, has you put your thumb on the scale, whether for good reason or not, right? And I would argue for not good reason. You put your thumb on the scales to push that district towards the Republicans. And it just jumps out as a partisan process when you consider the pattern of redistricting that's occurred the last 3 times, first adding in Palmer Lake and then Western Monument, and now all of Monument into that district. So as the district becomes even in competitiveness, then you put your thumbs on the scale and push it a little bit towards the Republican Party. And of course, there are rules that could potentially, through the courts, if someone decided to go that direction, could possibly enforce the blocking of this move, because they're 2 areas that are not contiguous with each other, because there's no way to travel between the 2 areas. And I do want to say a couple of things. I really appreciate a lot of Republicans coming out in support of specifically Map 6 version 3. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a bit of a laugh considering how similar versions 3 and 2 are, that you are all very excited specifically about the version 3 that Stan put together at the last minute there at that last meeting. So that's just entertaining for us all. And then people keep bringing up through this process that putting communities of color in a district is segregating them. So just to explain the purpose of the Voting Rights Act, that means that people are already segregated geographically. If you can draw them into a district, you're not moving them. It's just really silly point to make, and is actually the whole purpose of the Voting Rights Act, which is to give those communities political power. All right, well, thank you for your time, everyone. Bye.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Either in the audience or online? No more online? Okay, and going once, going twice, and last call for comments from the audience. And I believe before we move on to item number 4, we will take a very brief recess. Let's call that a 5-minute at 2:15. Good afternoon and welcome back to the Redistricting Commission meeting of Tuesday, August 15th. We had just completed item number 3. And before I move on to item number 4, I would like to request that one of the citizens that specifically had some things that she would like pointed out and corrected in public record. I think for the purpose of having everybody have the same information at the same time, I would like to acknowledge Ms. Chukas for some additional comments.
Just to call it out, again, it's in this bound version. It has a 26 at the bottom of it. It's talking about Final Map 6 version 2, but at the top of the screen, it says Final Map 5 version 2. That's not the big typo on it. The big typo is saying about Academy School District 20. In Final Map 6 version 2, Academy School District 20 has many precincts in Commissioner District 1. It has many precincts in Commissioner District 3. It has 1 precinct in Commissioner District 2. You can see it on if you look at the map, the very far southeast, that's precinct 445. You've had 6 meetings to correct that. That didn't happen on Final Map 6 version 2. Same thing on the page called 42. It says Final Map 6 version 3. And then it says at the bottom here, it says that Academy School District 20 is in districts 1 and 3. And again, it's not. The majority are in 1 and 3, but 1 precinct, again, 1 precinct 445 is left in Commissioner District 2. Those are the typos I noticed. You'll probably find a few others which say Final Map 5 throughout these printed pages.
Thank you very much. Okay. With that, we will move on to item number 4.
Item number 4 is an action item. The Redistricting Commission votes to adopt one of the designated finalist maps as the new political boundaries of the El Paso County Commissioner districts.
Okay, do I have any Redistricting Commission members who would like to kick off the conversation? Commissioner Gonzalez.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I did want to make a couple of comments on a few comments from the public. I appreciate all the comments these last, has been 10 meetings or so that we've been doing, and appreciate that. I think somebody said we might have forgotten some of the resident comments and what was asked for. I did want to highlight for the public that from those very first days and those very first meetings, there were really 3 main things that kept coming up over and over again. And we did listen. The main concerns back then, and continued to be, I believe, were consolidating Southeast Colorado Springs and making that whole, combining Patty Jewett neighborhoods and keeping that whole in one of the districts. And then keeping Monument whole was the third major ones. Other issues that came up were military aspects, some school districts, but as acknowledged very early, we have 17 school districts. There's no way you're going to get school districts to fit perfectly in districts. But the ones that kept coming up over and over again, Southeast Colorado Springs, Patty Jewett neighborhood whole, keep Monument whole. And the maps we're looking at do that. At least the one I'm looking at, I think there was a half district or something somebody mentioned, but we've looked at doing that. And I'll say we really listened in the aspect to Southeast Colorado Springs. The 30 precincts that we're looking at here were recommended as definitions by the public, particularly and significantly by Senator Tony Exum, who advocated for a definition of those 30 as well as others from the public. And we did just that in our maps. And so I really do think we listened to them. Also, I think somebody talked about the challenges of self-interest instincts going against that, self-preservation. I want to say those things, yeah, that pops up. Well, guess what? I've done everything I can to make sure I don't do that. If I wanted to do something in my self-interest, well, guess what? The maps I've been looking at and have been looking at supporting the most kicks me out of my own district. My last year and a half, I will not be representing myself or the people in my district. And why would I support that? Because it's the right thing to do to put that Southeast area of Colorado Springs together. So I'm willing to do that outside and against my self-interest because it's the right thing to do. And so those are the kind of things we've all been going through. This has been very difficult, very stressful, but I think we've been listening to the public. At least I've been trying to do that. And I appreciate all the work being done here and by the public, and especially the staff. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Vanderwerf, and I think at this point, let's we'll go through once with any comments, and then if there are any more, if there are any action items or motions taken, there will be further discussion from there. Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I appreciate Commissioner Gonzalez's comments, and I will agree with them and reiterate them to one degree or another in my own words. But to the comments that we were not listening to the community, we have actually incorporated a lot of features that were recommended to us. Now, to be fair, it just wasn't possible to recommend everything. And in fact, many of the comments actually were in conflict with each other. So we had those challenges. And then there were other requirements that we knew we needed to address that were not necessarily met by some of those citizen comments. But I will start off with what I think is perhaps the most important one, and that was the testimony from Senator Tony Exum, who recommended the Southeast remain whole. And what was very valuable to his input for this process was he actually defined for us what he believed the Southeast was. And we accepted that definition, which is 30 precincts, keeping them whole. And then we went through a process trying to figure out how do we keep those 30 precincts whole as one of the primary requirements. And we attempted to see if there was ways to do that in District 4 and also to do that in District 5. And it was tough to try to do it in District 4. And I can tell you that for various reasons that I will mention, I will not be in favor of the first map, map 1 version 2, and it's because we actually violate that 30 precinct rule in that map. To the other points, Commissioner Gonzalez also made these. There was a citizen request to keep Patty Jewett whole, and we actually went through a process to ensure that that was done, and it is made whole in District 3. We also had several comments from citizens in the south side of El Paso County asking not to split Carson or to separate Carson from Fountain because that's viewed as a community of interest, particularly by people down there. And to be fair, you know, the folks that live in downtown Colorado Springs might not have that same sense. They just might not know it because they don't live in that area. Map 1 version 2 splits Carson. But in the other two maps, which we'll deliberate on, I believe we'll be deliberating on further, they do keep Carson and Fountain whole. And then we had another challenge, and that was with Monument. Prior to our redistricting, Monument was split amongst two districts, and one of our requirements is to try to keep municipalities and communities of interest whole, and I believe that we will meet that by the time we complete the voting here. So I have these 4 items: keeping the Southeast whole, keeping Carson and Fountain whole, keeping Patty Jewett whole, and keeping Monument whole. And I believe that we will achieve those, and those all came from citizen comments. They were specifically from citizen comments. So we did listen to the citizens, and those are my comments for the moment. Thank you.
Commissioner Williams.
Yes, in addition to agreeing to the comments that have been stated, I will state that throughout this process, I do remember in the first meeting we had up at Lewis Palmer High School, I asked the question, what are those precincts that make up the Southeast? I have lived near Rampart High School now for 30 years, and that was, I think the first 10 years we lived here, I never went more than 10 miles from my house as I was chasing around little kids. So I think that was an important definition to establish immediately. The other item that I have tried to abide by specifically as well was to keep urban areas in one district. So one of the interests that we is in the state statute specifically is we should consider urban interests and cities and towns' interests. Obviously, the city of Colorado Springs is too large to have in one district, but the town of Monument is now whole in one district. And I appreciate the patience of many individuals as we figured out exactly where the town of Fountain boundaries lie. That one's a little bit different. We know that these boundaries will probably change over the next 10 years as far as the cities and towns as annexation may take place. But I really appreciate the efforts we've made to keep the Fountain area whole, to keep Fountain with Fort Carson. I think that's very, very important for our military community, to keep our southeast precincts whole, and to also keep the town of Monument whole. Thank you.
Commissioner Geithner.
I don't have any specific comments to this. I think I'll retain all of mine for moving forward a map. And if we're ready for that, I would have a recommendation.
Let's let Commissioner Gonzalez, and then I will make some comments, and then we'll move on with any action items.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on the maps themselves, I think I agree with the a couple other comments here. I'm not quite satisfied with map 1. Had issues with the way it broke up things, particularly as residents also came forward and probably around the meeting 3 and with a strong emphasis in the Fountain Valley for keeping Fort Carson as part of Fountain Valley, and I agreed with that. And so that as a community of interest, I am not satisfied with map 1, and so of the finalist maps, map 6, version 2, and 3 are the ones I was looking at. I did recommend forwarding to version 2 last week to get to the final groups. Where I'm looking at was the criteria. What criteria in these final maps make sense? The Voting Rights Act clearly has been brought up often in these meetings, and I think our bringing the 30 precincts together in those 2 finalist maps for 6.2 and 6.3 makes sense. Again, recommended by residents and State Senator Tony Exum and others that as a definition. And so I think that was something very important and is included in versions map 6.2 and 3. Shared public policy concerns, because this is what we have to fall under, concerns of urban and rural, and then community of interest, issues of demonstrable regional significance. And one of the things that did stand out outside of the municipalities and some of the communities of interest that we've already mentioned was the WUI, the wildland interface, urban interface. And I think that is existing in the maps 2 and 3 that we're looking at in terms of District 3 on the west side, and why Monument with that area next to the WUI makes sense for District 3. And so I think it's very much in compliance with what we're looking at in those shared interests and community of interest. And then just the additional positives of both those other 2 maps, splitting the Eastern Plains at Highway 94, not a criteria for approval, but I think is a strong benefit to the outcome of either one of those 2 maps. It makes things, I received calls the other week about a road, Judge Orr Road, and issues, and asking, is that in my district or Commissioner Geithner's district? And I had to go through a 3-minute dissertation of, well, how far east of it, and is it in the county, and how far south of 24 is it, or how far north of 94 is it, because our district zigzag between that. And so this is actually something that clears up things for our residents out east in terms of what is a good clean cut on the Eastern Plains. And again, none of these maps are perfect, none of the ones we've gone through, because that would be an impossible task to get all these community of interest, all the requirements from the state, what needed to be done. But I think those 2 versions do the best job of doing that. The thing for me that I think 6 version 2 does better than 6 version 3 in my mind, and they're similar. They both changed 63 precincts. The population affected under version 2 is slightly less, about 26,000 population less affected by version 2 over 3. There's also a better allocation, as was mentioned by some of the residents, of reallocating population so that some of the districts that are underpopulated have more population, and the ones that are overpopulated right now are below the average. That does a better job in 6 version 2 than 6 version 3 when we're looking at potential growth over the next decade. So I like that a little bit better in version 2 over 3 as well. And I think those were my main differences between 2 and 3. So based on that, I did like version 6.2 over 6.3 at this point, but it was very close. And I think even the competitiveness was a slightly closer on 2 versus 3 in aspects for, I think, both District 4 and District 3. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to speak a second time. I'll express my appreciation again to Commissioner Gonzalez about bringing up the wildland-urban interface. There is a community of interest concern regarding that along the entire west side, and I can give a few examples of that, but I think this will be illustrative of why I do feel strongly about it. For starting off, the Pikes Peak Office of Emergency Management has actually conducted several exercises. This is to help people on the west side, including people on the west side of the county, on the northwest side of the county, to make sure that they have the capacity to properly evacuate and get away from those fires. And those exercises have been in Crystal Park, Manitou Springs, and also in Palmer Lake. They have taken place across the west side. That's a common interest. In addition to that, one of the initiatives that I took on was to obtain federal funding to be placed into the Forest Service so that they could do mechanical mitigation of firefighting. And we were successful in that process in getting $18 million from the federal government to the Pike National Forest so they can do mechanical mitigation. And that mechanical mitigation is taking place today. It's funded. And that mitigation will go from Highway 94 all the way up to Douglas County, because that is a common interest about fire risk that those communities share. I'll also make a point that while there certainly are unique characteristics to both Monument and Manitou Springs, they are both smaller municipalities, and what comes with that is a lot of commonality in deliberations that both of them deal with on a regular and daily basis. I can even think just on a very simple basis, both of them have small libraries. I've been to both libraries, and I've been supportive in both of those communities in trying to help them improve their libraries. But these are just only examples. There's a dozen examples I could bring up about why these two communities, these two smaller municipalities, have a lot of commonality and fit well together. For those that think they don't, I think it's because they perhaps have lived a long time in one of those areas and maybe just don't really recognize or see the importance and the value or the commonality between those. So I wanted to make those particular points. There is another point that I would like to make, and this is this point about driving out of the county to get to another part, driving out of the district to get to another part of the district. And indeed, that has to be done, but that is actually being done today for me. I drive out of the district to get to the Monument area because part of Monument is in my district today. But there's no redistricting requirement to redistrict in such a way that you have a common road that allows you to get to every single resident without leaving the district. In fact, I will tell you, I have residents on the west side of El Paso County that require me to drive out of the county. I have to drive through Woodland Park to get to those residents. So we've got requirements. I have a requirement on the west side to drive out of the county and to drive out of my district. But those are not a component of any recent legislation. Those are not a requirement for redistricting. So I appreciate that citizens made comments to that, but I don't believe that those are truly issues. So I'll finish at that, and then we'll continue our conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. And some final comments from me. My fellow commissioners have brought up several issues and points. I did want to point out that that although Senator Exum did read those 30 precincts into the record, specifically, they had been submitted by citizens, and they had been submitted by citizens in other forms prior to that, specifically at least one resident of District 5. And so helping us actually define what the community defined themselves geographically as was incredibly helpful, and an indication of our ability to receive and incorporate the input that we received during this process. I also wanted to I want to get it back to, again, the criteria. It's been brought up several times, but I am going to summarize it in order. We've all seen Mr. Parcells' slides that kind of check off certain things and list them out, and then we've seen the clerk's analysis of whether those are binary check off or not of some of that criteria, and that has helped hone in the process. But I think what is incredibly important is the way that that the revised statute was written, and specifically, it lists things in numerical order that we have to consider. And I will just venture to say that number one has been perhaps the most difficult in being able to incorporate all the things that would make all of those who have invested in this process very satisfied. And that number one is that there cannot be more than 5% deviation. That was not something that was made up with how we wanted to stay within it. It's actually our number one requirement for redistricting. And so as we're looking at the changes we wanted to try to do to stay within that 5% deviation, and the population requirements actually became the most difficult part of this process. Number two is to comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965, which you've heard a lot of. In the middle of this process, I had the opportunity to get away to one of the presidential libraries, and it happened to be LBJ's. Lyndon Baines Johnson was the president and pushed forward the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And being in that presidential library and understanding where our nation was at the time, and to be in the middle of this process with that awesome responsibility to ensure the voting rights of everybody in this nation and everybody in our community was incredibly, it was astounding. It made me think about the awesome responsibility in front of us in a different way. And I'm grateful that that the clerk and recorder staff was able to help us figure out what that meant, to analyze the true intent of that. And so I think we've been given the data to do that. And then there are several other criteria. Criteria number three is, as much as reasonably possible, the Commission's plan must preserve the whole communities of interest and whole political subdivisions, such as cities and towns. And we've talked a lot about, we've defined that. We've defined communities of interest, shared public policy concerns, urban, rural, agricultural, industrial, trade areas, and then shared public policy concerns, such as education, employment, environment, public health, transportation, water needs and supplies, and issues of demonstrable regional significance. This, again, is a huge responsibility. And, you know, communities of interest, it doesn't include political subdivisions. It doesn't include partisan alignments. It doesn't include any currently elected officials. It is a community of interest based on geographical concerns and applications. So specifically, the law does spell out that. And so in that order, I thought it was important. We've all heard many of these things said, but in consideration order, I thought it was important to bring that back to this conversation. And again, it has weighed heavily on all of us. As I said in my early comments, I'm incredibly grateful for the time and energy that a lot of citizens have put into this. And I think we're at a point where we probably have some suggestions for ease of future process. I think the staff has honed in on how to get everyone the information all at the same time in a manner that we could digest and work with. I did want to give one other shout out. I think that let's see, Steve Martin filled in for Steve Klafke at one point. So thank you very much on the staff shout outs. And then in my little diatribe there, I said it doesn't, communities of interest doesn't include political subdivisions. I meant it doesn't include partisan, divided politics. Several of you have said that politics had no place in this, and I can speak confidently for myself that I have not let that interfere with my ability to analyze this information, and I appreciate the trust in the voters that I could do that. So with that, I do believe I heard several comments about action, direction. Who would like to kick that off? Commissioner Geithner.
Thank you. So I retained my comments because I think they're very relevant to the map that I want to move forward. And so I'd like to move approval for the final map as map 6 version 2. So several comments and a huge thank you to this entire commission, staff, public. Absolutely everything has been said, but the amount of work that has gone in and the thought into how do we do the best with all these criteria, it's a very difficult puzzle. But it's worth repeating that we set out with some very important requests and that were related to the criteria. One of those being the Voter Rights Act and keeping together the 30 Southeast precincts. That was difficult. We recognize that that's a large population. And so, moving those all into a single district required a lot of other thoughts about how to accomplish that. Patty Jewett, that's also been mentioned. Fountain Fort Carson. And this is a great time to talk about why I am not moving forward or asking to move forward map 1. Throughout this entire process, I had a goal of producing something substantially different, trying to challenge what we were doing in a different way to see what else we could get to, so we could really see that even through various different paths, what would really be the best map that would rise forward at the end. It is very clear to me that that is not the best map. It just wasn't possible to get those Southeast precincts into District 4 and still keep a district in 4 that made a lot of sense. Though I would have been open to considering the separation, as I said, because I think that there are a lot of things on the east side of the county that have also are of great importance. It's very clear to me that comparing those two, it is just not the best map option that we have. So we were able to keep together Fountain Fort Carson in map 6 version 2. We were also able to put Black Forest together, which I think is very important. One of the things in a past meeting that I read is a specific part of a community of interest that is related to the decisions that the Board of County Commissioners makes. And if we are voting on things that are going to affect that, community of interest, just saying I shop with these people, or I drive over here a lot, or I don't drive over here a lot, is not as impactful as saying, are we going to vote on things that if we split these communities apart, their voices will be diluted? And so that was my intent and where I focused on trying to keep those communities of interest together. Black Forest is one of those because of the land use decisions in particular that this Board of County Commissioners makes. Falcon is another one of those. We didn't talk a whole lot about Falcon being kept together because I think it has been together and we all knew that, but it was something brought about by citizens. Falcon is absolutely a community of interest and I'm glad that it was kept whole. We also have the municipalities that have been mentioned, Monument in particular, that we were able to make whole as well. That WUI that we've talked a little bit about, and I think Commissioner Vanderwerf did a good job of explaining the situation with the WUI. And I think that we were consistent about that. Even when we went to move things around to try to even out populations and we looked at 839 in our last meeting, that was not, even though it was on the south side, it was also not something that I thought was a great idea because it divided that western side. And so we are able to keep that whole also in this map. Several people have talked about the various comments and who we listened to and who we didn't listen to. But the reality is that the job of this commission was not to just take every single direction and try to put it into action. The reality is that listening to the public was an opportunity for us to think about those comments in relationship to the criteria that we had. As has been mentioned, it would have been impossible because some of them were contradictory. As a matter of fact, we had people who encouraged us to not keep together those 30 precincts, which I think we are happy to keep together because of the Voter Rights Act. So it just isn't possible to take every public comment. I will also say, many of our public comments were related to Colorado Springs City specific items. And while I appreciate everyone who came, a lot of that was just to the nature of who came. But we can't just only consider those who were able to come to this building or make a comment. We have to be thoughtful about all of the people who live in El Paso County. Of the meetings that we had, and I think we did a very good job of getting out and having those meetings all around El Paso County, I will still point out that I think we had 2 in municipalities. We had obviously, 2 municipalities outside of Colorado Springs, the Monument area as well as Fountain. We had many of them here. We had other ones that were inside of Colorado Springs. And we had one that was in the unincorporated area of El Paso County. That's by nature of the fact that we did one in every district. And I'm not complaining about that. I think we did as best as we could to capture as much of getting out into the public as possible. And yet still, there was only one that was that far east, which was still in what some would call an enclave of the city of Colorado Springs. And again, that's where the population center is. I'm not complaining about that. I think we did a great job. But I had to take that into consideration as I considered all of the comments. And when I talked a lot about the east, it's because I care very deeply about making sure that just because a resident doesn't show up to this meeting doesn't mean that their interests are not just as important. So that was a big piece of the consideration for me, specifically when we talk about Black Forest. We also talked a lot about the Eastern Plains. I think that the Eastern Plains is a significant, has a lot in common with each other, and yet we could not create a situation where we could get all of the Eastern Plains together. It's a population mathematical problem. And so I think that the best solution we came up with in Map 6 version 2, which is splitting that pretty solidly down the middle. So that means that each of them have a pretty significant voice in each one of the districts that they belong in. So those are all of my comments about why I'm moving forward that map for approval.
Madam Chair?
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you. I would like to second that motion. And I appreciate all the comments made by Commissioner Geithner, and I think there's a few more just quick points to make. While I can say that both Map 6 version 2 and Map 6 version 3 meet the essential requirements that we needed to take into consideration, I specifically will point out a few items in version 2. First of all, it meets the population equality and VRA requirements. It does enormous amounts of work in trying to address communities of interest, knowing that there's so many of those that you can't do them all, but we've done quite a lot. And it is clearly a better district map than what we have at present. It does address political competitiveness and does its best in order to have that embedded in the redistricting. It does keep the population balance within 5%, and it is also essentially compact. But on one other point that I think is important, and perhaps it may be not as critical as some of these others, but if you look at the overpopulation and underpopulation comparison between version 2 and version 3, version 3 has District 1 overpopulated, and it is going to grow fast, and it's underpopulated in version 2. That's very beneficial for trying to maintain population balance going forward into the future. It also does something similar for version 2. District 2 in version 3 is also overpopulated, and that will also be a fast-growing district, and it's underpopulated in version 2. I think that's also valuable. And in version 5, which is probably the district that has the least opportunity for growth, it'll still grow, but it has the least opportunity for growth. It goes from an overpopulation of 1,100 in version 3 to an overpopulation of 3,800 in version 2. These considerations, in my humble opinion, make the version 2 map a superior map to the version 3 map for the purposes of trying our best to maintain a population balance for several years going forward. So I second the motion for version 2.
Commissioner Williams.
I was looking very closely at the 3 maps here, and I will say, as far as the requirement, I think staying within the deviation was very, very hard when you started drawing your own maps. And I think that is why when we had a long 8-hour meeting that was so very long and frustrating for many of us, it's because if you move one precinct, it's just not a matter of swapping out 2 precincts between districts. As I came down to a final decision here, I was really leaning towards version 2 or version 3 of final map 6. And I feel that both of these maps meet the Voting Rights Act criteria. And this is important because we had a Supreme Court judicial decision in June about redistricting in Alabama. So right in the middle, it became very important to see how we focused on the different minority populations in this county. It just became very important because there was a new U.S. Supreme Court requirement, and that was that Alabama had not drawn their 2 districts correctly and would have to go back through and redistrict those. I really narrowed my decision down to version 2, primarily because of Commissioner Gonzalez's comments about the underpopulation of districts 1, 2, and 4. One of the early things we discussed in this process was the importance of land use decisions and the importance of where the county was going to grow. Well, if you live in the city of Colorado Springs, you have many individuals on city council to represent you in your land use decisions. Out in El Paso County, there are five of us commissioners, and there are 3 districts that we expect to see the rapid growth. And these were 1, 2, and 4. And so we always felt all along it would be better to overpopulate the West Side and Commissioner District 5. So I believe we've met the Voting Rights Act. We have met the deviation requirements. I will speak again to the importance of the wildland-urban interface. I do remember when the Waldo Canyon fire came down very distinctly as it came. There was a chance it could have come down through the Broadmoor. There was a chance, and it did come down along Garden of the Gods, but there was also a chance at the same time that it could have come down the Air Force Academy and into Palmer Lake. That is just the nature of the wildland-urban interface. I really do appreciate putting all of Black Forest together. It is definitely a growing community and a community with its own interests. And so I appreciate our efforts to keep Black Forest whole and to also keep, as I said before, the town of Monument whole and the town of Fountain whole with Fort Carson. So I will be voting for the motion.
Any other comments? Commissioner Geithner.
Thank you. I just wanted to add one final thing here. Some of the public comments around, I don't have anything in common with this area, so it shouldn't be together in a district. And I kind of mentioned this before, but, I live in Falcon. I'm currently in District 2. It would be very easy for me to say the same about many of the places within the district that I live, both now and in these future maps. When you have such a wide, large county, it is just not possible to just have something in common with everybody that you live in a district with. So that means that separately, we may have many different communities of interest that are not connected to each other, but are each somewhat of a community of their own. And I'm going to make the example of, again, the rural area. I would gather that if you went and asked someone who lives in the town of Calhan what they have in common with someone who lives west of Powers, they might struggle a bit. So even though those comments were made, I think that that's just something I want to clarify. It's not as if there's something unique going on in District 3. That is a natural consequence of living in a very large county that has a lot of different types of areas. So I just wanted to kind of remind us all that is going to be the case. I would venture to say in any district that you chose, you could find an area and make that comparison. So that's all I have.
Any other comments? Okay. Was Commissioner Geithner your initial moving forward a formal motion? And either way, could you restate it, please?
Yes, ma'am. My motion is to move forward map 6 version 2 as the final map and final districts in the redistricting process.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, that has been moved and seconded. A final comment from me, and it has been stated by my colleagues as well. I had kind of decided for many of the reasons mentioned that map 1 was not one that met the criteria that we wanted to see either. And again, those reasons have all been mentioned, and top of the list for me is that all 30 of those precincts that, again, we have over and over defined as a definite community of interest, were not included. And that was a paramount interest for me. And then secondary to that, and Fountain, Fort Carson, keeping that together. And I also, the issue was raised today about splitting of precincts, and that one had many of them that were not conducive to keeping communities of interest together. So for me, map 1 is not really one that I am interested in moving forward at all. And again, as my colleagues have said, the version 2 and version 3 of final map 6 are very close. I am more satisfied with keeping communities of interest together, even beyond that 30 precincts, communities of interest that I know as having represented that area. And we talked very early on, the area around Wasson High School. I think that version 2 does a better job of doing that in a more consistent way than version 3. And so I will be in support of this motion as well. Any other final comments? Okay. I will call the roll. Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That passes 5-0. Clerk, do we have any further business or direction from
So,
you?
commissioners, absolutely. Congratulations. And I want to sit there and publicly thank you as the commission. Complying with House Bill 21-1047 is something that is new. We have done a wonderful job, but commissioners, I will tell you is my staff through this whole process, to include Mr. Ryan Parcell, Steve Martin, Steve Klafke, have been absolutely amazing. I don't think there has been a weekend that has not been worked, some very long hours of putting this data together. I will tell you is I have seen a lot of efficiencies gained through this process from my staff. Where in the beginning, it would probably take us half a day to compile all the data necessary to present to you and to the citizens of this county. And as you saw last week during our meeting, they got it down to 20 to 30 minutes per map. It's absolutely amazing how they sit there and the efficiency and effectiveness is coming together. I will sit there and share with you is working through this process, which is something new here to all of us, is what I would like to do moving forward is working with our county attorney is to publicly come out and say, I think there needs to be an amendment to this bill. And that amendment is the data we provide should be provided to you as the commission and to our citizens 24 to 48 hours prior. We should put it out there beforehand because I think it hamstrung you and I think it hamstrung the citizens as well who did not have the time to sit there and review this information. So I've actually brought this up to the author of the bill that I feel, we need to push this information out there. When whoever goes through this process down the road much sooner than 1 hour prior to a public meeting. But I thank you, and I will tell you is we will have the final report out. I've already been working with the county attorney staff, and we're good to go. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And again, thank you to all of you for being involved in this process. I did want to do one more redo on a shout out. I did, I think, call out Scott Anderson of the PIO team. But to be honest with you, the broadcasting, the ability for public comment to be done online during a meeting, none of that would have happened without all of our technical PIO staff and particularly the ability to move from location to location and adjust out of just our normal AV setup was an impressive ability to carry out kind of the commissioner's direction of let's pull as much public process into this as we can. So huge shout out to the AV and communications team as a whole. With that, any final comments? Okay, this redistricting commission meeting is adjourned.